This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's community access radio station Plains FM 96.9 and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
It's time for Emergence News on Plains FM 96.9, citizen-made radio.
Hello and welcome to Emergence News. My name's John and it's my chance to do the intro today. We're Emergence News on Plains FM, Christchurch, the city by the sea. What's happening? What's going on? What on earth is going on? Well, Maitreya's emerging and we're going to talk about what he said about what's happening as he's been emerging. He's told some very interesting explanations for the way things are in the world. So to do that, I've gone through some of his messages, which go back to as far as 1978, picked out some key points. But with me in the studio today are two other co-workers, two other volunteers that are part of this global network of people that are talking about the emergence of Maitreya the World Teacher. To my left, I have Shafia. Welcome, Shafia.
Hello.
What are you going to talk about today?
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the background and more the esoteric stuff of what's happening and why it's happening.
Fabulous. Peter, and what are you going to talk about today?
Optimism, actually. We're going to try and look at an optimistic viewpoint of coronavirus, etc. and so on.
Okay. Well, listen, my introduction is about what did he say? So I started with his priorities. Maitreya and the Masters will show us that the only way to bring about peace is to create justice. The only way to establish justice is to share the resources of the world among all humanity according to need. Maitreya has formulated a number of simple priorities that demand immediate and worldwide attention. These cover the essentials of every man, woman and child. Really basic stuff. An adequate supply of food, housing for all, access to health care and education as universal rights. And interestingly enough, that's not being achieved in any country on this planet currently, not even here in God's own New Zealand. And of course, the other top priority, which has forced its way into our attention in the last 5 years, has been the rapid deterioration of our ecosystem, which is causing many, many issues. We have pestilence and plague and locusts. We have flooding and fires, stuff of a biblical proportion. Anyway, so I went through some of Maitreya's messages and they start back as far as 1978. Message number 12 in 1978. Man's problem today, as always, is of his own making, by the misuse of his divine will. Man has placed his future and that of all the kingdoms in jeopardy. Many today are beginning to realise this and are taking such steps as they can avert catastrophe. This is good. But not all men see the danger which faces mankind in increasing potency. This is back in 1978 this was written. Time is short indeed for the reconstruction of a world along lines more befitting man's true role and purpose. There are many today who admit the necessity for change, but still resist. There are many today who see the crumbling of the old and outworn world of the past, but cling to the old forms. And I guess, guys, what we're seeing globally is those two competing voices. Mm-hmm. We are seeing the voice of the old way of managing this planet, which currently has a lot of the power and resources drawn to it. And it is fighting a rearguard action to cling on to the old ways. Mm-hmm. And then we are seeing many and very new voices coming through. Large groups of young people, we're seeing lots of demonstrations. We are seeing catalysts of ideas that are driving people into the streets. And I think it's short-sighted to say that the label of the protest is the reason for the protest. So this is what's happening now. And he also talks about there is a new voice being heard among the nations. the voice of truth, which contains the hope, the promise of the new time. This voice will increasingly make its impress on the minds of men, for it is the voice of God speaking through men. And he has said from time to time to time, it is the young that will come through with the new ideas for our civilization. So that's what I'm starting with, some snippets of information from Maitreya, the teacher for the new age. He is the water carrier, the Lord of love, and he is the avatar for this age of Aquarius. All right, that's my intro done. Shafia, you're number 2.
Thank you. So as volunteers with Share International, we are just one part of a great body of humanity, which the esoteric teachings call the new group of world service. So many of us have incarnated at this time to do our part to assist in a great leap of evolutionary consciousness that will usher in a new world where we will acknowledge and live together as one human family. When I say we, I'm also talking about you, our listeners. If you feel drawn to listening to this program, it will be because you have knowledge inside of you that you're here to help change the world, and the recognition that we all have our part to play. Maybe you're already actively working in some field of service, or maybe you're wondering what it is you can do to help create a new world. It is certainly a huge task and might feel somewhat overwhelming. Our hope in sharing some of what we know and understand is that you will not feel alone. We sometimes might feel lonely, but in fact, we are never alone. We have the hierarchy of light standing with us and giving us protection and support. The hierarchy of light, or our leaders, who are, as our regular listeners will know, consist of Maitreya the World Teacher, the Masters of Wisdom, and all those who belong to the Great White Lodge. So who else would you think those would be?
The good guys.
The good guys.
Oh, and us.
And us, yes.
The group of world servers.
That's right, yeah. And I would think the Space Brothers and,
yes.
the avatars and all those.
Yes, many avatars, many teachers.
Yes, that's right. But they do have their opposite. According to the Tibetan master Dwal Kul, the Black Lodge, or forces of evil, are ruled by 6 Occidental and 6 Oriental masters, who are battling to maintain control of this world. Their major weapons are chaos, disruption, lack of established security, and consequent fear. This is Dwal Kul saying this. Mm-hmm. Hence, we have a global pandemic creating fear of death, economic instability, whilst highlighting the inequity which our present lifestyle sustains. There are riots caused by police brutality, which has opened up conversations around racism, power and control, accountability, and again highlighting the inequality in our systems of justice, of healthcare, and of economic security. Climate change is still a pressing concern and yet may have slipped into the background of our awareness. We are being bombarded with events that are creating the chaotic conditions spoken about by the Tibetan master at the beginning of the last century. These are the weapons of control that the forces of evil use and that we all need to guard against. So I was thinking a little bit today about the hierarchy and what they have to deal with, and I remember a story from Benjamin Krim way back where he said there was this window of opportunity where Maitreya could have stepped forward. Do you remember this?
Yes.
And he actually went to the media and...
Yes.
And he talked about Maitreya. Maitreya met them and he was going to meet them and they were going to introduce him to the world. And he said also that at that time, his master, who he had telepathic contact with, was away. He couldn't actually reach him because he was actually fighting these forces of evil who were really trying to stop this happening. Mm-hmm. And they succeeded. But and so... I wanted to talk about that a little bit because the master, Benjamin Krim's master says, from time to time, a new situation develops which requires the concentrated attention of the hierarchy to ensure its correct resolution. Many forces today are locked in conflict, and so great are the tensions that the hierarchy itself is fully extended to hold the balance. This is only to be expected as the moment of revelation draws near. Soon the world will face the choice to continue the ways of the past and perish, or to right the ancient wrongs and enter into a new life. Mm-hmm. Already the signs are that humanity is ready for change, is ready for the testing time ahead. But so much now depends upon humanity's right choice that naught can be allowed to distort its judgment. For this reason, the hierarchy works in unusual tension, conscious of its responsibility to guide men safely through this difficult time. And so it's interesting, isn't it, that they are fully extended as well. You know, we sort of think of them, these sort of great beings of light, but they are, you know, having to really work really hard on our behalf. You said
a couple of key things there too about this this conflict.
Yes.
About the difficult times, and I'm sure many people are feeling that. You also said that this misinformation, was that the term you used?
I didn't, but yes, that's...
But isn't that what we're seeing?
Yes, it is.
So much misinformation.
It creates the chaos.
It creates the chaos. So actually, if you were a reasonably unaffected person sitting on the sidelines, having a look at the world today, to actually find the truth of what is going on has become so much more difficult.
Yes, it does.
And it's that muddying of the waters, that's one of the chaos tools that you said that the Dark Lodge was using.
Yes.
It's really prevalent.
It is really prevalent, isn't it?
And the insidiousness of the conspiracy theory are so cunningly intertwined now that it's really difficult to pick which is actually the conspiracy theory.
Yes, well, I mean, the governments often have the conspiracy theories, and everyone else, you know, has to go along.
Well, it's that combination of spin, which all politicians have done for a long time, and may not be the complete truth, but it's not a complete lie either. And then it's kind of embedded with some chaos, and then there's a little bit of just straight out conspiracy theory thrown in, and then there's
the rest
fake
is
news.
Propaganda.
and there's probably truth in all of it, isn't there? Some truth in all of it.
That's how they get it through.
Yeah.
That's how it's accepted, because there's a grain of truth there somewhere.
Yeah, and if it was completely dishonest, most rational people could go, no, that's not sailing with me. But because there is that twist to it, it's very difficult to sit on the sidelines and gather information.
So how can we deal with this at this time? What is what could we tell our listeners that the best way to actually deal with what we're dealing with, which is this confusion, this chaos, this,
Well, it's decentralisation, isn't it? Forget about ourselves and help as much as we possibly can, really, to help people. There are organisations, like Oxfam, who I personally favour myself, that are helping people that are starving, and there's more people starving now at the midpoint of the virus than there was before. And if we can do that, it's of assistance, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a fan of the honesty, sincerity and detachment, and I think that if you are completely honest with yourself, it takes a little bit of mental scrubbing to actually go, why do I choose to believe that?
Yes.
Actually, I believe that because it sounds all right, or it makes me feel better, or it makes me feel safe.
Yes.
Or actually, what is the real truth here? Yeah. Can I remove myself from my vested interest in this philosophy or this theory or this story and actually see what's better? What's the better for everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. So honesty and some sincerity you have to apply to yourself. Yeah. My old university lecturer used to talk about being discerning.
Yes.
In what you read.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I've decided to do is to stop arguing with people.
Yeah.
You're wrong. Just doesn't work. So that's part of my stepping back. That's part of my detachment. Actually, there are two sides.
Yeah.
The old and the entrenched and the new wanting change. I know where I'm at with that, and I'm not going to draw anybody across the divide. I'm not a recruiter. What I've got to do is remain sane.
That's true.
Well, I'd just like to sort of put out there a little thing that we have here from Killer Mike, who's a rapper. Did you see his a speech at Atlanta when all the riots were happening, and everybody was burning down and they were looting, and he was saying, let's not burn our house, let's step back, which is the sort of detachment, let's go home, let's plot, let's plan, let's strategize, let's organize, and let's mobilize. And then let's vote all the people out, who are creating these conditions. Let's give our energy, which is exactly what Maitreya, I just thought, gosh, he's just, there he is.
Yeah.
I mean, Killer Mike's, sort of a real sort of a name, isn't it? But, he's saying what Maitreya says, he wants action from us. He wants us to be with detachment and with,
and an element of intelligence.
Yes.
Rethink the whole process.
Yes.
You're wrong doesn't work.
No.
Okay.
That's great.
I'll go back to the drawing board with that one. All right, look, Sophia, you and I could go on for ages, but I suddenly remembered that Peter was in the studio as well. I was having way too much fun. Peter, what have you got for us?
Well, I'm trying to look at the optimism and us.
Sorry, why do I keep laughing when he says that?
Yes, I mean, it's hard to see perhaps, but I came across in the latest Share International optimism in the time of Corona. And I thought, well, we've got to use that. And it's actually an interview by Felicity Elliott, who's a well-known author in regard to Share International. And she's interviewing Graham Maxton. I've never heard of him before, but he's actually an economist, lecturer, and best-selling author. He was Secretary General of the Club of Rome from 2014 to 2018. His latest book, Global Climate Emergency, was published this year. It looks at how societies can overcome the hurdles which stop them responding effectively to climate change. He is deeply critical of modern economic thinking and writes urgently about the need for fundamental change. In 2018, his book was Why We Need a Radical Turnaround. It was #1 on Amazon's bestseller in Germany. He is also a co-author of Reinventing Prosperity, Managing Economic Growth to Reduce Unemployment. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Managing economic growth to reduce unemployment, because we think that they're against each other, but
He's saying not.
He's got another idea here. So anyway, Felicity has been interviewing him, and she says, well, what strange times we find ourselves in. And Graham Maxton replies, indeed, but it is one of those things which I suppose has been expected in some form, and of course the more we push against the boundaries of nature, the more likely it is that such a thing is going to happen. But awful it is in terms of human lives lost and misery, is the first thing that gives me hope in a long time. And she said, well, how on earth is that? The idea that you can just make slight modification to the way we do things, the way we live, recycle more and cut the number of flights you take is not going to achieve anything like the cut in emissions level needed. But suddenly it seems possible. We can stop all the flights. We can stop all those cars, all those ships carrying all sorts of stuff that we don't really need around the world. And now suddenly that radical thing has been shown to have happened. So suddenly what seems a fanciful idea can happen. And this has given people like me a tremendous opportunity to say, look, we can do it. For the first time in a very long time, I feel optimistic because we can see that we can actually solve the climate problem. Now, just bringing in a little bit from Maitreya's Mission Volume 1, and it's from Maitreya, and you will find that the basis of Maitreya's teaching is right relationship between humans, man and God, and between man and his environment, the planet. We will come to understand that man, nature, and God are one, and that proper care of the planet and all the kingdoms in it is essential to the well-being of the whole. And Graham seems to be encapsulating this, doesn't he, in the sense that he's suggesting this environment, we've got to realise that we're all part of it. We're part of nature. We're involved in it.
And not independent of it. And certainly not its masters.
Yes. And, honestly, we just seem to be separating ourselves out from, what's happening in the, well, it's not my fault sort of thing, well, but we are part of it.
There used to be a term, husbandry.
Yes.
Do you remember that? Where farmers were husbands of the land, and farming was about husbandry of the livestock. And I think we've lost that.
Yes. I mean, you can see that, these various, Graham talks about these, obviously the carbon footprint and the use of carbon energy and that sort of thing. We're actually quite fortunate in New Zealand in the sense that we use 85% of what our power is sort of renewable. But, there's a lot of countries that are not in such a fortuitous situation that they can do this. And of course we probably kick back a wee bit now about some of the dams and whatnot on rivers and that sort of thing, but as an interim measure it has actually given us this scope where it's economic to use electricity, to use electric cars and that sort of thing. But if you look at other countries that are involved that don't have that power, that generate all their power by carbon, by coal-fired generators and that sort of thing, it's not really viable to be powering the electric cars
by burning coal.
Burning coal.
I see your point. Exactly. Yeah.
So, the whole thing has to be followed through. It has to be taken at a sort of complete level. Yeah. And I just
an end-to-end process.
Yes, that's right. You've got to just look at the whole thing. And so, here's certainly. It was an article that's worth reading, and he also goes into the universal basic income, which I felt was timely. And, we've talked about this before. And I think it is possible to do this sort of thing, but whether we're becoming more dependent on the state if we do that, it's something we've got to nut out, isn't it? We do have to think about it.
I find this really interesting because throughout modern history, technology has always made people unemployed. And yet when it comes to our time and our era, there's huge resistance to it. But technology is making more and more people unemployed.
Yeah.
And I think that COVID has shown us that an awful lot of the stuff that we do on a daily basis, if we stop doing it, there's some fairly short-term rewards environmentally. So it's a very interesting idea that we can restructure our economy.
Yes. And I've always said that, there's nothing sacred about a 40-hour week. What's we're all doing 20 hours a week. And as Maitreya says, we will have more leisure time in the future. We will become more creative. And it's only when we are more creative that we will find solutions to our problem.
It's a very difficult discussion between what I need and what I actually want.
Yes.
And I think what I want has swamped our idea of what I need, because what I need is very, very simple, actually. And as long as I'm understanding my role in things, what I need is completely attainable. The what I want muddies that water constantly.
Yes, until we get rid of the idea of capitalism and economic growth and GDP
and purchasing and materialistic
consumerism.
Attachment. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And honestly, we don't necessarily need 2 cars each.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that we've got and consider essential. What's wrong with borrowing the neighbour's lawnmower and filling it up for him? These sort of things we haven't even really thought about.
Yeah, or the city council owning electric self-drive cars, and I use my phone app and it picks me up at the door and drops me where I need to go.
Yes.
Pretty simple and completely doable with the technology now.
Yes, that's right. This is the Emergence News on Plains FM. For more information, go to shareinternational.org.
All right, listen, we've had the nod from the producer and the meters ran out on the electricity, so we've got to get out. Going to finish with a comment from Maitreya, which Shafia's just thrust into my hands. When I make myself known, I shall express the hope of all mankind for a new life, a new start, a readiness to change direction, to see the construction of a new world in which men can live in peace, can live free from fear of themselves or their brothers, free to create from the joy in their hearts, free to be themselves in simple honesty. Thank you very much.
All this information can be found on the Share International website, www.share-international.org. Scorpio Books in Christchurch carries the magazine and some books. And also don't forget the podcasts, which are available on the Plains FM website.
We welcome your comments, questions and feedback. Please contact us at emergencenews@gmail.com.
The opportunity to join our transmission is available Monday and Wednesday evenings and Thursday mornings, which gives us the possibility to do a service meditation in conjunction with Masters.